So can we start now, organizer?
Yes, Dr. Wael.
Okay. Okay, so Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and very good morning. I bid to everyone. So today we are going to continue with my second lecture. The title given is Endocrine Function and Control of Secretion. So basically, when we are talking about endocrine, for today we are focusing on more to hormone regulation in terms of secretion and also the function of hormones that have been secreted in our body. Okay. So in my lecture, we'll cover endocrine control, meaning that the overall picture, okay, the different types of hormone that been released from our body, and also how it's been regulated in terms of secretion and also inhibition. Okay, and then we are focusing on hypothalamus pituitary axis, in which one of the system that mainly control not every hormone, but few or several hormones in our body. Then we may focus on growth hormone and also reproductive hormone. Okay, so when I'm talking about hormone, like yesterday in gastrointestinal tract lecture, I also cover a few hormones that have been secreted along the GIT tract. And it's, for example, like gastrin, secretin, CCK-PZ, and this hormone is known as exocrine hormone. Yeah? However, for today, we are going to focus more on hormone that have been secreted by endocrine gland. Okay, what the difference between endocrine and exocrine is just a matter of pathway that how the hormone been delivered into or transported into the targeted cells. Okay, for endocrine hormone, normally they will be secreted or synthesized in the endocrine gland. Yeah, endocrine gland, then it will be secreted into blood capillaries. Okay, then the hormone will be transported along the blood vessels or blood capillaries to the targeted cells. Meanwhile, for exocrine, basically the hormone will be secreted by the specific cell. For example, gastrin will be secreted by G cells that are located at the polaris part of the stomach. And then the hormone will be straight away being secreted to the targeted cells. Okay. So even though this hormone actually been transported to basically to the whole part of body in blood capillaries, for example, like thyroid hormones, LH or FSH, action only is at which organ or tissue that contain or consists of the hormone receptors. Okay, so even though eventually the hormone actually been transported to maybe every cells in our body, but because there is lack of that hormone, that specific hormone receptors, so that we will not take action into that specific cell. Okay, so for example, thyroid hormone will only take action at the cells that contain thyroid receptors, thyroid hormone receptors. Okay. Okay, so hormones are chemical messengers that are secreted into bloodstreams and stimulate the physiology of cells in another tissue and organ. So we can say that hormone is very important to actually regulate whatever normal physiology that we have in our body system. Okay, so basically endocrine hormone will be produced in endocrine glands, and then it will produce or secrete hormones and enter the blood vessels, and then it will travel into the targeted cells. Okay. So in this table, this is a summary of different types of hormones that have been secreted in our body. Okay, so we have a pituitary gland. Okay, this pituitary gland responsible to secrete about 6 hormones. Okay, then we'll have a look into details later on. Then we have thyroid gland that is responsible for thyroid hormone secretion, and parathyroid gland for parathyroid hormone. And we have adrenal gland, okay, which is actually also secrete a few hormones here, like in the table. And then we have pancreas. And interestingly, pancreas is actually both endocrine and also exocrine gland. Okay, because pancreas produce glucagon and also insulin. At the same time, pancreas also actually secrete hormone or enzymes that actually react direct to the cells. Okay, And then we have ovary and also testes, which actually also produce its own hormone like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Okay. So now moving to the hypothalamus pituitary axis. Okay, so hypothalamus is located and is part of the brain. Okay, and then is actually a coordinating center of the endocrine system. Even though it doesn't regulate all the hormone in our body, but because there are about 6 hormones that actually been regulated by the hypothalamus pituitary axis. Okay. And it consolidates signals that derive from the upper cortical inputs. So it's actually connect the neural system, our neural system, and also the endocrine glands system. Okay, it delivers precise signal to the pituitary gland, and pituitary gland release hormones that influence most endocrine system in the body. Okay, so we can see here the hypothalamus. Okay, and it's actually connected into 2 different lobes of anterior pituitary and also posterior pituitary glands. Okay. So here hypothalamus act as connector between endocrine gland, which is the pituitary gland, and also nervous system, which is located at the brain part. Okay, and it's important to control the hemostasis of our body because the hypothalamus pituitary axis actually control the body temperature, thirst, appetite, and also weight control, emotion, sleep cycle, sex drive, childbirth, blood pressure, heart rate, okay, even the production of digestive juices and also balancing of our body fluids. This is because it's actually control the hormones that actually regulate, that have effect on all these functions. Okay. So these are the hormones secreted by hypothalamus. Yeah. So basically, hypothalamus will secrete this. Mainly is releasing hormone, meaning that this hormone will stimulate the production of another hormone. Okay. So we have ADH and also oxytocin, which is actually directly secreted and synthesized in hypothalamus. And okay, so we can see here the ADH and also oxytocin, okay, and then it will be stored in the posterior pituitary gland, okay, and then we also have prolactin and CRH. I just mentioned the short form, okay, the gonadotropin releasing hormone, and also GHRH referring to the growth hormone releasing hormone, okay, and also thyrotropin releasing hormone TRH. So basically this hormone being secreted by hypothalamus, and then they will stimulate different type of cells in the anterior pituitary gland to secrete another hormone. For example, TRH will stimulate TSH, okay, for corticotropin release. We'll see the table that summarizes the connection between the hypothalamus and also anterior pituitary gland later on. Okay, so when we mention pituitary gland, we understand that it is actually have 2 different lobes, which is anterior and also posterior. Okay. So the posterior pituitary is actually more to nervous system. We can see here, this is the posterior and this is the anterior. It is not one lobe that divided into 2 lobes. It's actually 2 different lobes, 2 different or distinguished lobes. Yeah. And they coming from different sources as well. For example, this posterior pituitary is more like a bundle of nerve. Yeah? And for anterior pituitary, they have their own cells, different type of cells that consist located in the anterior pituitary gland that secrete different types of hormone. Okay, so now we'll start from posterior gland because it's only secrete 2 types of hormone. So it's much easier to remember what actually been secreted in the posterior gland so that you can exclude that, and the other 4 will be secreted at the anterior gland, pituitary gland. So at the posterior pituitary gland is secrete oxytocin and also ADH, the antidiuretic hormone. Okay, and we know that oxytocin actually involved in birth, during birth, and also for ADH is actually controlling the water contained in our body. Okay, so this oxytocin and ADH is secreted at the hypothalamus, synthesized in the hypothalamic neurons. Okay, and then it will be travel or it will be transported into the posterior pituitary gland, and they will be stored there. Okay, oxytocin and ADH are stored in axon terminals in the posterior pituitary. When there is a stimulus, okay, and there is a action potential arrive at the level, and then axon terminal causes oxytocin and ADH to be released into the blood system. So this is for posterior. So basically, this is actually abundance of nerve, and the hormone being secreted at the hypothalamus, and then they will be traveled down to the posterior pituitary gland. And once there is a stimulus that will activate the action potentials, and it arrive at a certain threshold, then the hormones will release into the blood system. Meanwhile, for okay, we go into details a bit about about this hormone. So we have oxytocin and also ADH, you see antidiuretic hormones. For oxytocin, the function is to stimulate how it's being secreted. It's stimulated by impulse from hypothalamic neurons in response to cervical or uterine stretching and also suckling of infant at breast, because we know that oxytocin is actually will stimulate the milk production during breastfeeding. And inhibition, meaning that how actually this oxytocin release been inhibited just by lacking of appropriate neurostimuli, meaning that if the baby do not unable to perform suckling stimulus properly, then it will affect the production of oxytocin, and as a result will affect the production of milk by the mother. Okay. At the same time, for ADH, or vasopressin is another name for ADH, it is stimulated by impulse from the hypothalamic neurons in response to increase of blood solute concentration, meaning as the water concentration reduce, it will increase the blood solute concentration, and then that it will stimulate the production of ADH. Okay, or decrease of blood volume is a patient coming with hypovolemia. Okay, it will also increase or stimulate the production of ADH. As a result, the water will be retained, water retention, or we can accumulate more water to increase the blood volume, or at the same time, meaning compensate the blood loss that we have, the effect of blood loss that patients has. Yeah. So and the organ or the ADH will actually target the kidney as the main organ. Okay. Meanwhile, for oxytocin, the receptors for oxytocin present in uterus because it's responsible for uterine contraction during labor, as well it also present in the breast for initiate milk ejection. Okay. So that is for posterior. So here more detail on oxytocin effect. So we have here the higher brain center at our brain. So the suckling by the baby will actually initiate the stimulus. Okay, will stimulate the higher brain center to activate the hypothalamus to produce to produce oxytocin, and then the oxytocin will travel down the posterior pituitary gland and it will be stored there. Okay, and for as there is a further stimulus, the oxytocin will be released into the breast to actually produce milk secretion. Okay. Okay, so this is another diagram that's summarized. Suckling send message to hypothalamus, and this is an example of positive feedback because as the oxytocin release, that oxytocin will further actually stimulate the production of oxytocin by the hypothalamus. Okay, so the production of that hormone will further stimulate the production of that of oxytocin release. So we can see here the arrow. Okay. Okay. So now we are moving to the anterior gland. So if in as compared to the posterior gland, okay, for anterior gland, when there is a production of hormone in the hypothalamus, and then those hormone, mainly known as releasing hormone, will actually stimulate, okay, different types of cells, yeah, we call it as tropic hormone secreting cells, to stimulate the production of another hormone, okay. And then that hormone produced will be transported into different site, and they will actually either stimulate a production of another hormone, or they will actually regulate certain process. So we have here 6 types of hormone that actually present in the anterior pituitary gland, which are somatotropes, corticotropes, lactotropes, gonadotropes, and thyrotropes. This is only these actually different types of cell that will secrete different types of hormone. So somatotropes will secrete GH, the growth hormone. They actually account for about 50% of anterior pituitary gland. Okay, that's why the production of GH is the main hormone that been produced in the anterior pituitary gland. And it's actually also suit with the demand of our body, which is growth hormone is quite a main hormone that actually required by every cells in our body, because growth actually involve all parts of our body. Okay, so corticotrope will excrete or secrete adenocorticotropin hormone, okay, about 20%. Lactotropes will secrete prolactin. Gonadotropes will secrete LH and also FSH, and thyrotropes will secrete TSH. Okay, so this hormone, okay, will be synthesized and secreted by the anterior pituitary gland, and then they have different targeted cells. So for growth hormone, the 3 they are targeting liver and also skeletal muscle and bone, because these are the 3 tissues that mainly involved in growth. Yeah? Okay. Apart from being stimulated, the growth hormone also can be inhibited. Yeah. So the inhibited by feedback inhibition that exerted by growth hormone, and also insulin growth-like factors. Yeah. And by insulin-like growth factors, and by hyperglycemia. So certain condition will stimulate the production of growth hormone, and certain condition will actually inhibit. So we have a look into more details later on in my slide. Okay. Meanwhile, for TSH, the targeted is actually the thyroid gland itself. So this is not the final hormone. This hormone, the TSH, will actually be transported into the thyroid gland, and thyroid gland will secrete thyroid hormone. Okay. And then for the ACTH, it will be stimulated by the CRH, okay, and then the targeted organ, adrenal cortex, which actually promote the release of glucocorticoids and also cortisol, okay. And FSH and LH is quite different as compared to others, because FH and LH is actually targeted direct to the organ, which is ovary and testis, and then they will stimulate the maturity or the development of follicle, and also spermatogenesis, and then and from the ovaries, the matured ovary will be ovum will actually produce another hormone, which is estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. Yeah. Okay. So we also have prolactin. Okay, as another hormone that been secreted by anterior pituitary gland, and this is also actually responsible for breastfeeding, as will increase or decrease milk production. Okay. So this table summarize the 6 different hormones that have been secreted by anterior pituitary glands. Okay, so this like a summary of example of the connection between the hormone that been secreted from the hypothalamus. For example, we have here hypothalamus will here is more clearer because for example, we take the thyrotropin releasing hormone that been secreted by hypothalamus. It will stimulate the production of thyroid stimulating hormone at the anterior pituitary, and TSH will further stimulate the production of thyroid hormone in the thyroid gland. Okay, and we know that thyroid been secreted in T3 and T4 form. Okay, and then there will be mainly in as a T3, but then there will be as T4, but then converted into T3. And as there is an increase the more of thyroid hormone being secreted, okay, that thyroid hormone will produce negative feedback. Okay, there is a short loop, meaning that short loop is when the thyroid hormone will produce negative feedback into the anterior pituitary to reduce the production of TSH. As a result, they will be reduce the reduction of thyroid hormone. At the same time, the excessive or the increase of thyroid hormone will also give negative feedback to hypothalamus. So this one is known as a short, long loop. Long loop meaning that long is a longer pathway because it's coming from the thyroid hormone and then direct to the hypothalamus. And the production of TRH will be reduced, and it will further reduce the production of TSH and further reduce the production of thyroid hormone by thyroid gland. So this is example for thyroid. So we can actually replace it with another hormone, for example, like CRH that stimulate the production of ACTH, and then it will be increase the production of cortisol and our glucocorticoid, and the excessive of cortisol will exert negative feedbacks to the hypothalamus and also pituitary gland. That's why if somebody coming with either hyperthyroidism or high cortisol level, we need to differentiate whether the defect or the abnormalities is due to the pituitary gland damage to the pituitary gland, or is actually disturbance at the hypothalamus level. Yeah, because obviously, if we different cause, we need different management. Okay, because the effect might be the same, which is maybe hypo or hyper of the N hormone. However, we need to identify whether it is due to the pituitary gland or hypothalamus that actually been have problem. Okay. So these are another diagram that summarize the connection between hypothalamus, pituitary or tissue will end up produce another hormone. Okay, so this is actually just a summary of what have been described just now. Okay. Okay, so as a summary, hypothalamus pituitary axis have different effects of our body. Have effect on gonads, which is ovary and testes, also on thyroid gland, adrenal gland, water balance, okay, specifically by ADH, and also milk production by oxytocin and prolactin, and also growth. Okay. So now we are focusing on growth hormone. So we are not saying about growth hormone. It's actually net synthesis of growth of our body. It could be as a result of increasing in physical size, whether it's involved weight gain, the increase of muscle, okay, and also the lengthening of long bones. So the combination of the increase of the muscle build up and also the lengthening of our long bones will actually produce the growth effect, okay. So it's also involved increased size and numbers of soft tissue cells, okay. And we need growth hormone in order for the cells, for the tissue to actually not only increase in number, but also increase in terms of the size of the cells. So indirectly, growth hormone has an effect to the growth rate through the insulin-like growth factors, okay, that produce in the liver, that actually stimulate the body cells to increase in size and also in terms of numbers by increase the rate of cells division. Okay, and directly, the growth hormone have an effect on the body growth by increase the metabolic rate. Okay, so it increase the fat metabolism. Numbers of these cells. Okay. So what actually factors that affecting growth hormone secretion? What are the factors that increase or stimulate the GH secretion? And what are the factors that will inhibit? So basically for each hormone, what you need to know is these main factors that stimulate and also factors that inhibit or slow down the secretion. So for growth hormone, these are the factors that will stimulate or increase the secretion of growth hormone, which are the low GH level itself. If there is a low GH level in blood system, okay, so it will actually giving signal to hypothalamus to secrete the production of the releasing hormone of GH. Okay, and then hypoglycemic, meaning that when there is a low sugar level in our body, so we need to actually digest or metabolize the more fat and also protein and also glucose to increase the glucose uptake. So basically the GH will increase. And if there is a high amino acids level in our body, it also will stimulate the growth hormone, because we know that protein or amino acid is one of the important component for protein synthesis. Yeah, so it will stimulate the protein synthesis, and by as the protein synthesis increase, so the growth will take place. And if there is a low level of fatty acid, it will also stimulate the growth hormone just simply by increase the metabolism rate to actually provide more fat and exercise, because there is more demand. So the growth hormone will be also secreted to actually produce to satisfy the demand that we need during our exercise. Okay, so there are factors that inhibit. So the other is like a vice versa, like as listed here. As hypoglycemia will actually stimulate GH secretion, hyperglycemia will inhibit. Okay, and also with hyperlipidemia, obesity, and feedback inhibition of GH and IGF. So basically, when there is an excessive level of growth hormone, level of insulin-like growth hormone, they will give signal to the hypothalamus and also anterior pituitary gland to actually reduce the secretion of GH. So that is what we mean by feedback inhibition. That's a negative feedback that produced by the increase or excessive level of this hormone. Okay. Okay, so the the growth hormone releasing hormone, the growth hormone releasing hormone is the hormone that been secreted by hypothalamus that will stimulate the anterior pituitary gland to secrete the growth hormone. And this growth hormone will target the cells that present or consist of growth hormone receptors that manipulate liver, bone, and also different types of cells, because metabolic reaction also take place in many cells in our body. Okay, and this is the stimulus for for growth hormone releasing hormone. This is just like another repetition like previous table. Okay. Okay, this is another diagram that hopefully can give you a clearer picture. Okay, so this growth hormone have indirect action on liver, okay, to produce more IGF, and then they have action on skeletal and extraskeletal. Okay, and for direct action just now is actually involved in fat and carbohydrate metabolism. So clinical manifestation is either is being excessively been secreted, which is growth hormone, which can cause acromegaly and also giantism. Okay, on the other side, if there is a lack of problem in secretion of GH, it can cause dwarfism. Okay. So these are the two clinical manifestation that actually normally present with someone who have GH abnormalities problem. So the problem could be due to the hypothalamus level. It could be at the anterior pituitary level. Okay, but because, for example, if someone have cancer, the at the anterior, that affect the anterior pituitary gland, because 50% of production of hormone in the anterior pituitary gland actually secrete growth hormone. So growth hormone is one of the hormone that might be affected significantly by any deformities at the anterior pituitary gland. Okay. So now we are moving to the reproductive hormones. Yeah. So apart from the growth hormone, will stimulate the production of LH and FSH, yeah, by gonadotroph cells in the anterior pituitary gland. Okay, and this LH and FSH, they actually will target the gonads, which is the ovary and also testes that is responsible for the reproductive hormone secretion. Okay, so this is at the anterior pituitary level. Okay, and you can see here this table summarized for female FSH. FSH and LH both actually have effect on female and male. Okay, even though the names is follicle stimulating hormones, okay, but it still have a role in male reproductive system. It might not stimulate the follicle maturation, but it's actually stimulate spermatogenesis. Okay, so we can see here in female, FSH responsible to stimulate ovary produce of steroid hormones. Okay, so we know that ovary actually produce estrogen, progesterone, and also testosterone. Yeah, so ovary will produce. So FSH is the hormone that responsible or have a role to stimulate the ovary to secrete or produce estrogen and also progesterone. And it also, FSH, in terms of pattern of secretion, it surges at the mid-cycle of menstrual cycle together with LH, and it also have a triggers effect for ovulation. Luteinizing hormone, okay, it also stimulate ovary to produce steroids, and it also have a specific function in terms of it trigger the ovulation itself. Okay, and it turns the follicle, the matured follicle, into corpus luteum once the ovum or the oocytes been secreted or be excreted. Okay, so for male, the FSH will stimulate Sertoli cells to produce androgen. Okay, and then it's also involved in spermatogenesis. And FSH also stimulates Sertoli cells to produce inhibin. Inhibin is a hormone that will actually provides negative feedback for the anterior pituitary to decrease FSH. Okay, so some hormone, for example, growth hormone, the growth hormone itself can act as a hormone that produce negative feedback to the anterior pituitary gland and also hypothalamus to reduce the production of growth hormone release if there is excessive of growth hormone secretion. But some hormones, for example, like FSH and LH, they need the inhibin. They need another hormone, another type of hormone, which is for FSH, it is actually inhibin. Okay, that actually will produce that negative feedback. Okay, so Sertoli cells produce inhibin, and this inhibin will give signals to anterior pituitary gland and also hypothalamus if there is to stop or to inhibit the FSH secretion. Okay, for LH in male, it will stimulate the Leydig cells to produce testosterone. Okay. And that testosterone will provide negative feedback to anterior pituitary gland and hypothalamus to inhibit or to reduce the secretion of LH. So for FSH, inhibin will produce the negative feedback. But for LH, the steroid hormone, which is the testosterone itself, will actually produce the negative feedback to reduce the LH production. Okay. So now we are focusing on male productive system. So we know that testis is one of the very important component that actually involved in production of sperm. Okay, and sperm are delivered to the exterior through the system of duct. So there is a duct that connect the sperm to be ejaculated, and then seminiferous tubules within the testis produce the sperm. Okay, this is the seminiferous tubule. Yeah. And then surrounding the seminiferous tubules are interstitial or Leydig cells. That just now we call that Leydig cells will be stimulated by LH to produce testosterone. Okay, so Leydig cells responsible for testosterone production. And then there is also spermatic cord that enclosed to parasympathetic and sympathetic nerve system. And excessive sex gland just to help to actually secrete the sperm to the external. Okay, so what happened during spermatogenesis? So we know that spermatogenesis referring to the production of synthesis or maturation process of sperma. Yeah, so it's referring to the development of sperm that occurs in the seminiferous tubule of the testis, and it begins at puberty and continue throughout adult's life. And at the same time, certainly able to release inhibit that produce the negative feedback to control the FSH secretion by anterior gland. So what happened during spermatogenesis? So it involved few stages. We have spermatogonium, then it mature or develop into primary spermatocytes, secondary spermatocytes, early spermatids, late spermatids, and then it's developed into a mature sperm cells and ready to be delivered into the or ejaculate into the reproductive system of female, so that the fertilization will take place. Okay. And another component that important to transport the sperm is actually semen, and scrotum is more like they actually contain the testicle, meaning that the site that where the testis is located. All this actually a support system, so the scrotum will provide an appropriate temperature, which it says that just lower than the core body temperature, and this temperature actually is the conducive and also to optimize the spermatogenesis process. Okay, so that is for male reproductive, and we're moving for the female reproductive system. These are the organs that involve, which is we have ovary, fallopian tube, and uterus, cervix, also vagina. Okay, so during the follicular development, we know that LH and FSH are actually important to make sure the maturity of follicles, the primary oocytes, will take place. So for female, at birth, almost 40,000 of primordial follicles, which also known as primary oocytes, actually already present in the ovary of the female. Okay, so at puberty, when there is enough maturity of the brain, of the anterior pituitary gland to produce enough enough LH and FSH, okay, to actually initiate the maturation process or further development of follicles. Okay, even though there are about 40,000 of primary oocytes, but we know that not every of these primary oocytes will be ovulated. Only the one that able to reach the most matured follicle will release their ovum, their eggs during ovulation. The remainder, meaning the balance, will go atresia, meaning they will die, the cell will die, and will go atresia, meaning the death of the cells. So during this follicular stage, meaning that the maturation or development of the follicle from primary oocytes, they will develop into oocytes and follicle, and further the bigger follicle, and then they will reach the complete matured follicle. Okay, and the one that arrive or achieve the most matured follicle will actually release the egg during the ovulation. Okay, so this is what happened during ovulation. The large increase of estradiol. So we know that estrogen or estradiol is actually released by granular cells. Okay, as the follicle mature, the numbers of granular cells also increase. Okay, so it's will proportionate with the increase of estrogen production. So as there is estradiol release increase, it will actually stimulate the LH release. Okay, so this is a positive feedback, meaning that the secretion of estrogen, the excessive or the increase of estrogen secretion will further stimulate the LH secretion and LH release. Okay, and we know that we need the LH surge to actually lead the ovulation. So the wall of the most developed follicle will rupture, okay, and it will allow the release of ovum into the fallopian duct or tube, okay, and the granular cells will undergo hypertrophy, and the ruptured follicle will undergo corpus luteum. That corpus luteum in this one, and this corpus luteum will further produce progesterone. Okay, so we can see here the relation between the follicular ovarian cycle, okay, during the follicular stage, which is involve the maturity or the development of the follicle from oocytes primary to secondary and to the final stage until the eggs being excreted, which is during the ovulation, and then the granular cells will undergo the hypertrophy, and the ruptured follicle will undergo corpus luteum. Yeah? And we can see that ovarian hormone level, which is the progesterone, will further increase as the corpus luteum will produce progesterone. So if there is no fertilization take place, okay, so the wall of uterine doesn't need to be maintained. The thickness of the wall of the uterine doesn't need to be maintained. Then there is a drop of progesterone, estrogen, okay, that actually will also cause the menstrual bleeding. Okay. However, if there is fertilized egg, the corpus luteum will further increase or produce progesterone to maintain the thickness of uterine wall, okay, for the first 12 weeks, until that function will be taken over by the placenta. Okay, so the estrogen and progesterone will further secreted just to preserve the fertilized egg, to do the implantation, and following the completion of placenta formation, then the secretion of estrogen and progesterone will actually proceed or continued by the placenta cells. Okay. Okay, so that is actually the summary for female hormones. Okay, so I think that's all, because the topic that given to me is regulation of hormone, the endocrine secretion and function, and at the same time I also need to cover ovary and testis function. Okay, so I'm not going to very detailed in terms of reproductive system. I just might summarize or explain that related to the reproductive hormones. Okay. Okay. Uh, I think that's all. Is there have few more minutes, or is there any questions, or you just want to take a break before the next lecture? Because it's going to be another long day today. Is it until night, the lectures?
Yeah, supposed to be until 9.
I think it must be very tepu, but then I hope at least you have, it's like a revision. I believe it's like motor revision session for all of you. But I think what's important at the postgraduate level is to have a very compressed notes. Yeah. So always summarize your information with table, diagrams, and discussion helps a lot. Because sometimes you remember your friend explained to you, but you don't remember what you read in the book. Okay. Should we stop now, or is there any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Nobaya, for an interesting lecture.
Okay, thank you very much and all the best once again. I hope, I don't know whether I'm being helpful here, but I hope I'm being helpful, if not that much, a little bit in the process of your postgraduate study. So all the best. May Allah help you along the journey. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.